Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Mother, my humble obeisances. You are welcome. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, Mother Malati, Hare Krishna, you are welcome to the platform today. Can you unmute your mic, please? Your mic is muted.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mother, you are welcome. Please, today we won't be able to share the screen on the verse on the screen. Maybe you will just have to read from the book, please.
Oh, that's no problem. I have it right in front of me.
Thank you, Mother.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can I share the screen from here? Larry didn't come with you.
Yes, Mother, please, you can start, please.
No.
All right.
Life is up and down. At the point when everybody believes
But I think there's other talking going on, and it's not. Okay.
It's muted.
Jaya Radha Madhava Sundari Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Sundari Hari Gopijana Vallabha Giridhari Gopijan Vallabha Giridhari Yasodanandana Brajadanandana Yasodanandana Brajadanandana Jaya Radha Madhava Sundari Hari Jaya Madhava Sundari Hari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, continuing in the 7th chapter, the son of Dronacharya punished. Today is text 53 and 54. I'm trying to remove the glare, but I don't seem to get it. So I'm going to say the word by word and the of the synonyms first, and then I'll chant the sloka. Sri Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, Uvacha, said, Brahma Bandhu, the relative of a Brahmana, not, Hantavya, to be killed, Atataye, Atataye, the aggressor, Vedana Arhana, due to being killed, Maya, by me, Eva, certainly, Ubhayam, both, Natam, described according to the rulings of authority. Pahi, carry out. Anusasanam, rulings. Puru, aid by. Kati Shrutam, as promised by. Satyam, truth. Yatat, that which. San Tavyayata, while pacifying. Priyam, dear wife. Again, Priyam. So the first one is Priyam, long A, second one is Priyam, short A. Priyam, satisfaction, cha, also. Bhima Senasya, of Sri Bhimasena. Panchalya of Draupadi, Mayam unto me also. Eva, certainly, cha, and. Sri Bhagavanuvacha Brahma Bandurnahantavya Atatayidarhana Mayaiva Vyamma Manatam Parihyanushanam Guru Pratishratam Satyam Yatat Santyavyatta Priyam Priyam Cha Vinusenasya Panchalya Mayam Mevacha. The translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. So this is like two verses in one. The personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, a friend of a Brahmana is not to be killed, but if he is an aggressor, he must be killed. All these rulings are in the scriptures, and you should act accordingly. You have to fulfill your promise to your wife, and you must also act to the satisfaction of Bhimashena and me. This is Krishna speaking to Arjuna. Purport. Arjuna was perplexed because Ashwatthama was to be killed as well as spared, according to different scriptures cited by different persons. As a Brahma Bandhu, or a worthless son of a Brahmana, Ashwatthama was not to be killed. But he was at the same time an aggressor also. And according to the rulings of Manu, an aggressor, even though he is a Brahmana, and what to speak of an unworthy son of a Brahmana, is to be killed. Dronacharya was certainly a Brahmana in the true sense of the term, but because he stood in the battlefield, he was killed. But although Ashwatthama was an aggressor, he stood without any fighting weapons. The ruling is that when an aggressor, when he is without a weapon or a chariot, cannot be killed. All these are certainly perplexities. And besides that, Arjuna had to keep the promise he had made before Draupadi just to pacify her. And he also had to satisfy both Bhishma and Krishna, who advised killing him. And this dilemma was present before Arjuna, and the solution was awarded by Krishna. Again, the translation. The personality of Godhead Sri Krishna said, a friend of a Brahmana is not to be killed. But if he is an aggressor, he must be killed. All these rulings are in the scriptures, and you should act accordingly. You have to fulfill your promise to your wife, and you must also act to the satisfaction of Bhimashena and me. Om Agyantamirandasya Janana Sakalaya Chakshumilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskachana Satarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaivyacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So I hope everybody is well, health is keeping strong, and your Krishna conscious health, I also hope, is very strong. Having good health, physical health, without good Krishna conscious health doesn't really do much good for us. The reason for good health is so we continue to serve Krishna in our many capacities. May you have good health. So, just 1 minute here. Okay. So this situation is almost, in a way, a little amusing. Yeah. In as much as that we have a situation here where you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Because he's being told, Arjuna is being told, not by just somebody common on the street or an incidental person, but he has promised his wife Draupadi in a very heart-rendering way, I will bring you the head of Ashwatthama for having killed your 5 sons. I'll bring you his head. And then Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and also the Guru of Arjuna, as well as being his best friend, he's telling him, kill him. And not only that, he's being advised by Bhima, kill him. So Bhima is senior to Arjuna. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his dearmost friend. What is he going to do? And how should he do it? That is a dilemma that was being faced. So in this particular section, in this particular chapter, there are so many powerful lessons and messages that, for spiritual advancement and knowledge, a suitable place and atmosphere are definitely required. And it was explained in the beginning of this chapter that an ashram is a place where spiritual culture is always foremost. And it doesn't matter whether the place belongs to a householder or a mendicant. The whole ashram, the varnashram system, is so designed that each and every status of life is called an ashram. You have your Vyastra ashram, Brahmacharya ashram, Brahmacharini ashram. You have your sannyas ashram, Vanaprastha ashram. All is an ashram. And so it means, this whole varnashram system is designed so that each and every status of life is called an ashram. And this means that spiritual culture is the common factor for all. The difference only is in a matter of formality on the strength of renunciation. For example, the sannyas is certainly supposed to be fully renounced from any form of sense gratification. So obviously that ashram is the stronger one from the top. So impersonal realization of the absolute was also touched upon. So this impersonal realization of the absolute by the partial approach of the impersonal Brahman or the localized Paramatma doesn't permit anyone to enter into the kingdom of God because you're tinged by this incomplete realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Sri Narada was advising Srila Vyasadeva, the author of the Bhagavatam and many, many other Vedic literatures, was being advised to become absorbed in transcendental meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his activities. So, as such, Srila Vyasadeva, he didn't take any notice of the effulgence of the Brahman because he understood that absolute vision. The absolute vision is the personality of Godhead. And that's confirmed in the Gita 7:9 that Vasudeva Sarvam Iti. Devotional service, or bhakti yoga, is the function of the internal energy, and there's no place as such for inferior energy, or what we call the material energy. Just as there's no place for darkness in the effulgence of spiritual light. The present conditional state is due to influences of the external energy, and that means the illusory energy takes the initiative while the Supreme Lord is aloof. So the Lord doesn't desire that a living being be illusioned by the external energy. That's not his desire. The external energy is aware of this fact, but she still accepts a thankless task, she meaning Maya Devi, thankless task of keeping the forgotten soul under illusion by her bewildering influence. And the Lord doesn't interfere because such a performance of the illusory energy is necessary for reformation of the conditioned soul. So the Lord himself descends from his kingdom upon the kingdom of illusory energy. And the person now and personally gives relief in the form of Bhagavad Gita. Very nice statement, that gives relief. Krishna, God, is personally giving relief to the conditioned souls in the form of the Bhagavad Gita. And in the Bhagavad Gita, he personally suggests that although the waves of the illusory energy are very stiff, Prabhupada used that word, stiff, means difficult to overcome, one who surrenders into the lotus feet of the Lord is set free by the order of the Supreme. And Prabhupada gave an example that, the prisoners kept in the prison house. And occasionally the head of the state or the head of the local area, the head of the state comes into the prison, and he's not a prisoner, but he's within the prison. And if he likes, he can order someone to be released. Executive order. Okay, this man, let him go. So the Supreme Lord, he is offering the key to get out of the prison of illusory energy via Srimad Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is the summum bonum remedy for the suffering humanity in the clutches of Maya Devi. Vasudeva, therefore, first of all, he had to diagnose the actual disease of the conditioned souls, which is the conditioned soul is being illusioned by the external energies. So both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities are undoubtedly qualitatively one, but the Lord is the controller of the illusory energy. In other words, the illusory energy is not acting on its own, on her own. So the Lord is controlling the illusory energy, and the living entity, whereas, is controlled by the illusory energy. So therefore, the Lord and the living entities are simultaneously one and different, having the qualities of the Lord, but not having the power and strength of the Lord. Krishna can never be controlled or seduced by the material energy. So the mitigation of the material affection does not wait for the development of transcendental knowledge. Rather, knowledge is dependent, and by knowledge here we're speaking transcendental knowledge, is dependent on devotional service for the ultimate realization of the supreme truth. And this realization is coming itself through the personality of Godhead to the conditioned soul who has prepared himself and freed himself from illusion and become free from illusion by the mercy of the supreme truth. So there are very senses of which the ear is most effective. And Prabhupada explained that because this sense, the ear, the hearing, works even when a man is deep asleep. One can protect himself from the hands of the enemy while awake. But when you're asleep, the only protection is this hearing, which for me would put me in a bad situation because I'm deaf. So I only hear by putting these little plastic things in my ear, but you don't sleep with them. So I can't even hear an alarm clock, Anyway, I'm sure Krishna will make some arrangement if we needed help while we're sleeping. The ultimate result of devotional service then is to develop the genuine love for the Supreme Personality. And Prabhupada explained how love is a word which is often used in relationship between men and women. And love is the only word which can actually be used properly to indicate the relationship between the Lord and the living entities. And that is because the living entities are mentioned as prakriti in the Bhagavad Gita. And in Sanskrit, prakriti is the feminine object. The Lord is always described as Param Purusha, or the supreme male personality. So therefore, this affection between the Lord and the living entities is somewhat, Prabhupada said, somewhat like the relationship between male and female. Therefore, the term love of Godhead is quite appropriate. So by hearing the subject matter in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the false perplexities of materialism are removed. And then Prabhupada explains, real peace in society begins, which politicians are aspiring so eagerly for in so many nations, so many endeavors the politicians make. They want a peaceful situation between male, female, nation and nation, but at the same time, because of too much attachment to material domination, there is illusion and forgetfulness, and therefore Prabhupada said the politicians' peace conferences cannot bring any peace in society. That can only be done by hearing the subject matter described in the Srimad Bhagavatam about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's our business, to make sure that the message of Godhead is far and wide distributed. The theme of the Bhagavatam is to cure the materialistic disease of the human being by our stopping the pangs of material existence. So these pangs of material existence are all the different adversities that are undergone as a resident in a material body. When the unalloyed practice of sadhana bhakti is matured into transcendental love for the Lord, then the transcendental loving service of the Lord begins gradually developing into the 9 progressive stages of loving service under the headings of attachment, love, affection, feeling, affinity, adherence, following, ecstasy, and intense feelings of separation, the most high level. And then there was a nice mention by Prabhupada, one of the verses about Hari. So this word Hari has various meanings, but the chief import of that word is that he, the Lord, Hari, vanquishes everything in auspicious and takes away the mind of the devotee, the inauspicious activities and thoughts that trouble the mind. This is taken away by the Lord by awarding pure transcendental love. And by remembering the Lord in acute distress, one can be freed from all varieties of miseries and anxieties. There's so many wonderful stories by devotees who were in extremely perilous, even life-threatening situations. And simply by remembering the Lord and calling upon him without any further effort, they were freed from their distressful, dangerous situation. The Lord responded. So generally, the liberated souls are attached to this impersonal Brahman with an idea, what they call this monistic view. They want to become one with the Supreme Whole. But by the association of pure devotees like Malati Dd, even liberated souls have become attracted to the transcendental qualities of the Lord. So the basic form of liberation is that the attachment to the impersonal aspect of Brahmajyoti, but even those persons can become closer to the Lord by hearing from Bhagavatam, from devotees of the Lord. And the devotees and the Lord are interlinked, they cannot be separated. So therefore the talks about them are all Krishna Katha. In other words, speaking about the devotees of the Lord is also Krishna Katha, are topics of the Lord. So the subtle forms of material activities are finer than the grosser methods of material manipulation. These subtle forms of material activities, and then there are finer and finer gross. It's still on the gross material, but it's very fine. Just like there are things that we can't see with our gross eyes. So then you look through a microscope, and then it's magnified, and then you can see them. So those are what you might say the more subtle types of material matter. But these subtle, there's even more subtle forms which come through sound. So what was happening that this there's methods of chanting hymns, certain hymns that produce a nuclear-like weapon. And this is an example is like the Brahmastra. So produced simply by chanting hymns, appropriate hymns. And for the creation and activation of such a weapon. And it's not only like these weapons are so powerful, they can just blast beyond any nuclear activities that we are aware of. And not only that, they're just not flying blindly. The expert practitioner will release the weapon and he can direct the weapon where to go, and he can also withdraw it. So this type of military activity is unknown in our current age. Krishna is almighty, and he is especially the cause of fearlessness for the devotees. And the devotee of the Lord is always fearless because of the protection given by the Lord. And then Prabhupada was explaining how the material existence is something like a blazing fire in the forest, which can be extinguished by the mercy of Krishna. We chant every morning, Sham Saradavanala Lita Loka, Trinaya Karuna Ganavanatam. And the spiritual master, he is the mercy representative of the Lord. So when a person is burning in the flames of material existence, you may receive the mercy of the Lord, receive the rains of mercy of the Lord. So the transparent via medium of the self-realized spiritual master. And that spiritual master, by his words, can penetrate the heart of the suffering person and inject knowledge. Inject knowledge. Well, just. Are you still there? Somebody just beeped into my screen. So he can inject knowledge of transcendental knowledge, which alone can extinguish the fire of material existence. So nowadays, of course, we're kind of all about injecting vaccines and different things in our body. And those things can act on a limited level to alleviate some type of material distress or hopefully prevent it. But there still will be distress of one sort or another, because we're in the blazing fire of repeated birth and death and old age and disease. And none of these material injections can penetrate the heart and extinguish the fire of the material existence. That can only be done by the spiritual master, specifically by his words, which can be in a book form also. But transcendence is not static. It's full of dynamic variegatedness. And in this situation, Arjuna and Krishna, they were both described as being in an angry mood. And Arjuna's eyes are like balls of red copper, molten red copper, whereas the eyes of the Lord were just like lotus petals. So we learn that the angry mood of Arjuna and that of the Lord are not on the same level. In other words, an ordinary person, not Arjuna wasn't ordinary, but if you take an ordinary person and a transcendental person and both become angry, you cannot compare because they're not on the same level. We could see Srila Prabhupada sometimes became strongly angry, not about any egotistical. Prabhupada had no false ego. It wasn't like that at all. But when he detected persons decrying or offending Lord Krishna, or devotees offending each other, he could be very strong. And that anger was justified because it was being used for Krishna to make a point. So Krishna had lotus eyes, even though his anger was still, he had lotus eyes, where Arjuna was just like these balls of fiery copper. And I think we've all seen angry people where their eyes practically become reddish and fierce looking. So that type of anger is not justified. The word, and then we, were talking there was the dilemma was because Aswatthama is Brahma Bandhu. So a person who happens to take birth in a family of Brahmins is not automatically qualified to be a Brahmana. And Prabhupada gave the example that the son of a high court judge is not virtually a high court judge. It's not passed on in the genes. But he says there's no harm in addressing a high court judge's son as a relative of the honorable justice. So therefore, as by birth, one does not become a high court judge, so also one does not become a Brahmana simply by birthright, but by acquiring the necessary qualifications of a Brahmana. So an enemy who does not resist is never killed by a warrior who knows the principles of religion. And it's explained that former battles were fought on the principle of religion and not for the sake of sense gratification. I want more land, you got your foot in my space. That wasn't the criteria. So if the enemy happens to be intoxicated or is sleeping, which the sons of Draupadi were asleep. And that rascal Ashwatthama, this low-life son of a Brahmana, killed them in their sleep. So there was no way he could be given consideration himself as a Brahmana, at the best, a so-called son of a Brahmana. And if, but even if such a person is intoxicated or asleep, it's never to be killed. This is all from Manu Samhita. And there are some, these are some of the codes of a religious war. Like formerly a war was not declared suddenly on the whim of some foolish political leader. It was carried out on religious principles. And the Kshatriyas, the king, they were taking advice and instruction from the Brahmanas, who were giving their advice and instruction on the principles of religion, free from vices. So violence carried out on religious principles is far superior to so-called non-violence. Sometimes you have these people, they're called pacifists, and they will never raise a finger. And Prabhupada, he gave an example one time. He said, if you see, if your spiritual master is being attacked, someone is attacking, and you just stand there because you don't want to be violent. He said, is that a very good thing? So violence is there in all aspects of life, one way or the other. But if it's violence according to religious instruction or principle, that is allowed. Otherwise, leave aside. According to Manu, the great author of these civic codes and religious principles, even an animal is to be considered a murderer, because animal food is never meant for civilized man. The killer of an animal is considered to be a murderer, because animal food is not intended for civilized man, whose prime duty is to prepare himself for going back to Godhead. So Manu explains that in the act of killing an animal, there's a regular conspiracy by the party of sinners, and all of them are liable to be punished exactly like the party of conspirators who kill a human being combinedly. So then we know that those who get permission to kill the animal, he who sells the slaughtered animal, even the one who sells the animal to the slaughterhouse people, he who cooks the animal, he who administers distribution of the foodstuff, and finally that one who eats such cooked animal food, all are murderers. All of them are liable to be punished by the laws of nature. So there's also Tama, the son of Dronacharya. As mentioned, he killed the sleeping sons of Draupadi. And by doing so, he dissatisfied his spiritual master, Duryodhana. Duryodhana would never approved of the heinous act of killing the 5 sleeping sons of the Pandavas. So this means that this Ashwatthama, he became an assaulter of Arjuna's own family members, and thus he was liable to be punished by him. And in the Shastras, he who attacks without notice or kills from behind or sets fire to another's house or kidnaps someone's wife, all are condemned to death. Nowadays, we have to be a little careful about interpreting such things or acting in such a way, because these are very high level principles governed by Shastra. And because we are not very highly evolved, we are more than likely not able to carry out such behavior without ourselves becoming implicated. One time in the early era of ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada was present, it's still present. There was one young devotee, 22-year-old lady, and her her husband began to have an affair with another person's wife. The guy was a scoundrel, to be sure. So when the husband of that wife who was having the affair with this husband of another devotee found out, he killed him. And he was feeling justified because it says that you can kill someone who, takes advantage of your wife. So he felt some justification. But, of course, the laws of our modern country don't accept that type of behavior. Maybe in some Muslim countries they probably do, but I mean, in general, it's not done. So, of course, he was sent to prison. And then that left the poor lady. The husband was killed, so she's a widow. She has a little baby, maybe 6 months old, and she was left stranded in that way. Due to his behavior was unfortunate. It was condemned, but the killing was also condemned. So nobody was winning in that situation. And actually, it was very interesting because the lady was thinking that she was, she had this baby, and she was wondering, should she get married again? She would like more children, maybe, and the baby would have no father. So she was thinking like this, but she did not express it to anyone except her brother, who was a devotee. And so the brother said, let's go speak to Prabhupada. So they had an appointment. They went to see Prabhupada, and this was in Los Angeles. And they hadn't said to anyone else about this thought, this dilemma. Should I get married? Should I not? Just like Arjun, should I kill? Should I not? So they did the right thing. They went to the Prabhupada, the supreme authority for us at that point. And as the door was opened, they were making their obeisances. They hadn't even got their head up from the floor. And Prabhupada said, so you want my advice? They hadn't mentioned a word to him. Nobody did. So you want my advice? They looked at each other. Now, what do you do? If your guru says, you want my advice, what are you going to say? How shameful it would be to say, oh, no, Gurudev, no. How shameful. At the other hand, he gives you the advice and you don't follow it. That's even worse. So what a dilemma, what to do. But the good lady, she said yes. And Prabhupada said, it didn't work the first time, meaning the marriage. What is the guarantee it would work a second time? Better you take nice care of your daughter so that she becomes a devotee and live your life in Krishna consciousness. That was his advice. She's young. The mother was 22. So then the brother said, well, I think she wants to feel protected. And Prabhupada, with great endearing compassion, said, you do not feel protected? And he looked at the brother, you do not feel protected? Because actually, Prabhupada was our protector. And now he's feeling concerned that they don't feel protected. Such a generous, loving mood Srila Prabhupada always displayed with his disciples. In the same way, how Lord Krishna always takes care, loving care of his disciples. Although the way he may choose to do it may not always be what we think. Hari, he takes away the Hari, he removes. So Krishna, he can remove our desire for sense gratification, which is an impediment. Prabhupada had his own experience, how Krishna gradually took away everything. He was a successful businessman, and the success was being removed. In that way, he was free from any entanglement and ready to fully engage in the active service of his spiritual master and bring Krishna consciousness outside of India. So all Arjuna being encouraged by Krishna outwardly. And it was really just a test of Arjuna's sense of duty. It wasn't that Arjuna was incomplete in the sense of his duty. And Krishna was not unaware of Arjuna's sense of duty, but Krishna, he puts to test many of his pure devotees just to magnify the sense of duty. And then by their example, other people can become inspired and encouraged. Even the gopis were put to such test as well. Sri Prahlad was put to such a test. Dhruva was put to such a test. All pure devotees. Lord Jesus Christ was put to such a test. And all such pure devotees that come out are successful in the respective tests of the Lord. But one has to have good discriminatory power to judge such a thing on the merit. So we shouldn't follow the the dilemma on here where like don't kill, or the don't kill is coming from the heart of Draupadi, who was described as mild-mannered woman. And in her mildness, even though she was deeply grieving the loss of the son, she was exhibiting great compassion for the mother of Ashwatthama. And she was thinking, if that Ashwatthama is killed, then his mother will be grieving and crying like me. And that's not a good thing. She was thinking like that. So Draupadi desired Ashwatthama to be released at once. And that was her sentiment. It was a good sentiment for her. But this doesn't mean that a devotee of the Lord can tolerate all sorts of tribulation personally. Such devotees are never unkind to others, even to the enemy. Those are the characteristics of a pure devotee of the Lord. And it's said in the Ramayana that Maharaj Dasaratha, the father of Lord Sri Ram, he used to control arrows by sound only. And he could pierce his target with his arrow only by hearing the sound without even seeing the object. So this is a finer military science than the gross military weapons used nowadays. Now China has built the biggest, largest warship, and they're starting to ramp up their military. So you don't do this unless you plan to go to war. So now there's a lot of concern, like, who's going to be the target? And obviously it's probably going to be America. So gross weapons, but the subtle weapons are more powerful. And even an arrow can be controlled by the sound of the expert practitioner. So all of this was taught to Arjuna. He knew all of this science. And therefore, Draupadi was wishing that Arjuna feel obliged to Dronacharya for all these benefits. Look, this was your guru. And because of your guru, you know all these arts of military, the finer arts. And in the absence of Dronacharya, his son is his representative. So that was the opinion of Draupadi, who is described by Prabhupada as the good lady. And it may be argued why Dronacharya, who was like a rigid Brahmana, very fixed, why should he be teaching military science? But the reply is that a Brahmana has to be expert in everything, and he should be able and ready and able to teach whatever the department of knowledge is. A learned Brahmana, therefore, should become a teacher, a priest, a recipient in charity. A bona fide Brahmana is authorized to accept such professions. Even in New Vrindavan, Prabhupada was discussing about Varnashram and a Varnashram college. And he was saying this point here, a learned Brahmana, become a teacher, a priest, and a recipient of charity, and he's authorized to teach all professions. So one devotee asked, you mean even military, a Brahmana? Well, yes, not that he necessarily would have to do that, enter into military activity, although he could if the need was there, but he must be competent to teach to others. So here we saw how a insult, I mean, killing beyond insult, but the killing of innocent children and the grief that ensued. One must always be careful. As Prabhupada said, a cultured person should always be careful when dealing with worshipable family members. And Ashwatthama acted foolishly, recklessly, and is now putting Arjuna in this damned if you do and damned if you don't situation. And only Krishna can successfully unravel these complexities, which is coming up in the next verses. So if anybody has any questions, I can try to answer.
Thank you very much, Mother, for this wonderful class. We're very grateful for your class. So we request devotees to raise their hand if there's any question.
Well, not only questions, if they have some comments or corrections also, please. We like to hear what others have to say.
Mother, I have a question. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
My question is, why is it that despite the battles of Kurukshetra, the killings, the treacheries, the cheating, it is still considered scriptural, and it is being used to teach the world the moral conduct of human existence, despite their violence or criminal activities in the scripture, like the case of Duryodhana and the Kauravas? Why do we still spread these messages of violence, using it as an example to the world?
So why do we
still use this Vedic, this war as a scripture to teach people how human beings should exist? But people in this scene, in these dramas, they are evil, like the ones of the demons and the demigods.
Yeah.
Why don't the Vedas just use the saintly people and give their stories? Still, they use the demoniac people to spread the word. Maybe some people are following the footsteps of the demons.
So why do we
preach the violence of the Vedic scripture, the negative part of it? Why not just the saintly parts?
We are not preaching violence, but violence will be there. We have to be prepared to defend, and to defend sometimes that requires violence, but that is not violence. That is that type of violence is not mundane. The devotee is being attacked, and you just sit and watch the person be attacked. Is that a good thing? So you must respond, and therefore you must know how to respond. Even now, I know many devotees, they have learned some martial arts. They're not planning on killing anybody, but they're ready to defend if the need be. If the need arises, they can defend. They can defend the devotees, they can defend the deities, they can defend the temple, because they know the art. So we're not preaching random violence. We're not even advocating for violence. We're advocating on behalf of Krishna, and specifically on behalf of Krishna in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose appearance day is soon, in 18 days, or maybe 17 days now. We'll be observing the appearance of Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu also came with weapons. What was his weapon? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is a transcendental weapon of the holy name that is just suitable for this age of Kali. In Kali Yuga, nobody can follow these higher forms of weaponry, military science, of higher forms of so-called meditation, etc. What the former ages produced is simply not suitable for this age. But the knowledge and information is there in the Shastra, and it has to be there. We must know these things.
It's like
So,
Srila Prabhupada said, devotees should not read the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam without beginning from the first canto. Because the 10th canto is like the amorous pastimes of Krishna. Some people, because whatever you read, whatever you hear influence your consciousness. So if we don't read, people don't jump to 10th canto because they may be lusty. The same way, people should not be hearing about these Kurukshetra battles because they will also affect their consciousness and they begin to act like that. That's my question.
have you noticed anybody who read the Bhagavad Gita who learned about the Kurukshetra battle and then became violent and started killing people because they read the Bhagavad Gita or even the Bhagavatam?
Of course, because the materialistic people, they read the Gitas, they don't become devotees. They say it's scriptural. They go to war to one country after the other. They are reading Bhagavad Gita, but they're not devotees. They feel if God can do this, why can't we?
If God can do something, why can't we?
Because yeah, we're people say like that.
We are not God. Anyway, what can you do? You know, like Prabhupada said, one time when confronted with a person who just could not accept an explanation, he just said, I've only brought one medicine, please take it. For such people, just get them to chant Hare Krishna, what else? And if they can't do that, then give them some prasadam. This was also Prabhupada's instructions one time after a college program where the students were just restless. They were moving around, they were talking while Prabhupada was speaking. So he cut short, the lecture, and he said kirtan. And even during kirtan, they were not being attentive. So then he stopped the kirtan and he said, distribute prasadam. And then they were very attentive. So on the way back, he told Kirtanananda that in such situations where the people are just so disinclined for the higher sentiments of life, just give them prasadam. And nowadays, people are so much even more degraded than 50 years ago. Even you give them prasadam. What's this? What's the ingredients? What's in it? Is there sugar? Is there GMO? Is there milk? Is there dairy? Is there this? Is there that? Are there grains? Is there gluten? My God, people have become so low that they can't even take the mercy of the Lord in the most easily assimilated manner of Krishna Prasadam. What can we do? So if somebody is so foolish that they're going to read the Bhagavatam or the Bhagavad Gita and think we're preaching to go out and kill people, that's really unfortunate. What can we do? We can't change our books. The books are the backbone and the basis of our knowledge and of this movement, in fact. So if people are so degraded, they really need, more than anything, they need the message of Godhead, which is coming in our Shastra. And we need to become expert preachers in a way that we can show them the actual truth that is being preached in these books. That's all I would say about it. Oh, nobody's there.
Thank you, Mother, for your answer. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, do you feel, proper answer?
Yeah, it's okay. It's good. Thanks.
Hare Krishna. So I now have to take your leave. I want to thank you very much for allowing me in your association. And may you celebrate Gaur Purnima this year in a wonderful way. And may the mercy of Lord Chaitanya flow further and further and deeper into our hearts and lives and all around, so that all people, whoever they may be, can become purified and joyful in the association of Lord Chaitanya and his devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mother. We ask all devotees to kindly unmute yourselves.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna to Mother for coming. Who is
Hare
speaking?
Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna, Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna, Hare Krishna,
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 Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare
Hare
Rama.
Rama, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.